What's up, guys? Jamie here. Very excited to have you here on the training today. We're going to be going through our podcast closing masterclass. And for you guys who don't know what the podcast closing masterclass is it's basically your quick start to making money inside of the Podcast Profit Lab program. One of the biggest things that a lot of people think about is when they come inside of our program, the number one question they have is, well, do I have to wait until my podcast is launched before I can start making money? And the truth is there are a lot of people who've come through our program who have actually started to make money and started to make sales before their podcast is even launched. Now, for some people, that's kind of been happening by accident. For some people, it's been happening kind of sporadically, and some people it hasn't been happening at all. So my goal with the training today is basically to give you guys the step-by-step framework so you can understand what you need to be able to start making offers and start making money with your podcast even before it's potentially launched. Now, there are going to be a couple of caveats to this. One of the biggest things that holds people back from making money with their podcast is almost always the fact that they don't have an offer. So if you don't have an offer, that's something that you definitely need to work on, because whether you know who your dream customer is or whether you don't, if you don't have something to offer somebody, then they can never buy something. And this is honestly one of the biggest stumbling blocks that a lot of people come into inside of this program. It isn't that they don't know how to sell, it's just that they don't have something to offer. Now, what we're going to go through is the very first part of this training. I'm actually going to go through how you can actually get clear on your offer. I'm going to talk about what kind of offers work very, very well with podcast closing. And we'll talk a little bit about what offers don't work as well. And I want to help you guys get clear on that first part of the section. What is it that you need to actually be able to understand so you can execute on getting your offer in front of your dream customers? The second thing that we're going to go through today is actually understanding the dream customer. A lot of people, when they go through the Podcast Profit Lab program, the very first thing that we go through is the podcast identity pillars. And that helps you to really understand about your identity of your show, but your show should always be based around your dream customer. And we're going to talk a little bit about why that's important today, so that going into the program, you can make sure that your podcast is designed in such a way that's actually going to be bringing you customers. And it isn't just something that you're creating because it's something fun you want to talk about or is something that you're enjoying. The reality is this should be a podcast that drives your business, not just something that you're doing for fun or fulfillment. Both is fine, but this is called the Podcast Profit Lab for a reason. We want to help you to make profit with your business through using this method. Now, the third and final thing that we're going to talk about is how you can actually start podcast closing and making that offer to your different customers and prospects before the podcast is actually launched. So I'm going to talk about what's involved in that, how people have closed deals before their podcast is actually launched, and what kind of things that you need to do to be able to get yourself in that same position. So first, we're going to talk about how to actually get clear on your offer. So today is actually a really good day to talk about this, because we just had Catherine Jones inside of our Facebook group inside of Podcasting 101, and she's talking about actually teaching people how to become funnel designers. And the reason I say that's a really good example is that when I first got started with launching my very own podcast, I knew that I wanted to be serving entrepreneurs. I knew that was my dream customer. But the problem I had was that I didn't know what service or what product I was going to sell them. So I went out and I created this podcast and I started speaking to all of these different entrepreneurs, interviewing them, finding about what they're doing in marketing and their tips and tricks. And then on the back end, I waited for weeks and weeks and weeks with the hope that somebody was going to reach out and somehow give me money. But the reality was I didn't have an offer. There wasn't something that I was putting out into the world to say, hey, this is what I do and this is what you should buy. And eventually what happened is somebody reached out to me back on the podcast and they said, Jamie, after the podcast interview, we were talking about funnels and it got me so excited. Let's try and get back on another call. And we ended up getting on a call. And at the end of that call, he ended up paying me $2,000. Now, some of you guys may have heard this story before, but the reason I'm telling you this story is that that first call helped me to see that to be able to sell somebody something, you have to be able to get clear on what that offer is. For that particular person, I was helping them with a funnel, and that was the product that I was actually going to be selling going forward. Now, since then, my product offering has shifted slightly. Now we're selling courses online. We're selling the Podcast Profit Lab program. And because of that, the way that I'm trying to get my offer out to people with podcast closing has changed slightly as well. So something to just really think about before you come into this process is, what is that product? Now, when you're trying to get clear on what product you're trying to offer people, and when you're trying to understand, okay, what is it that I can actually sell? What is this offer that I can put in front of people? The very first thing you need to think about is, well, who is the customer that I want to sell? So many of you, when you come into this game, you'll say, oh, I want to sell Facebook ads. Who is a good fit for the Facebook ads that I'm selling? And in that situation, you may say, well, dentists can make a lot of money, and therefore they could have a lot of success with ads. So I'm going to go and serve dentists. But honestly, that's one of the backwards approaches to actually creating your offer. Really, you should be thinking about, who is my dream customer, and then what problems do they have, and how can I solve that problem for them? So the very first part of this framework, like I said, there's 3 parts. The first is getting clear on what you're actually going to offer to your dream customer. The second thing is to understand who that dream customer is. And then the third thing is the strategy you can use to start podcast closing. So let me just go through and explain to you guys a couple of different examples of offers that work very well, and also some examples of offers that don't work very well. So the very first thing to understand is that with podcast closing, if you have a higher ticket offer, you usually are going to have a bit of an easier time with using podcast closing from the get-go. So if you sell a $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, $10,000, $1,000 plus product, what we would call a mid to high ticket offer, then what you can do is that with podcast closing, you're going to be able to actually reach out directly to the people that you want to sell to. And the reason that we can do that with a high ticket offer and not with a low ticket offer is purely based on the numbers, right? If you sell a $20 product, you don't want to go and speak to 20 individual customers on a podcast to sell that $20 product to, because even if you had 100% success rate, you're only going to make $400. And that sucks for all of that effort for the podcasting. So the reason that a higher ticket product can work is that you might do 5 podcast interviews or 10 podcast interviews. And if one of those people buys, then it's worth $1,000, $2,000, $5,000 to you. So first of all, you have to think about it from a numbers and a logical perspective. Now, that is the first way that you can actually have your offer really working well, is if you're selling a higher ticket product. And this works great for people who offer a service, for people who are coaches, consultants, or course creators. Now, there is another way that this can work as well. So that first approach, what we're doing is we're creating a high ticket offer for our dream customer, and we are going to be using podcast closing to sell to them one-to-one. So that would be like me interviewing Catherine Jones. And then after I've interviewed Catherine, I say, Catherine, you should create a podcast. I would like to help you do that. Here's my offer. It's $5,000 and I will build your podcast for you. That would be a good example of what we're talking about right now. So if you're here watching this right now, just take a pen and paper and just take a second and start to write out, what is your offer? Is your offer a high ticket product? And is your offer something that you want to give to your dream customer? Is this offer actually for your dream customer, or is it maybe not for your dream customer right now? And this is something we want to make sure we're helping you guys to understand. Now, another example of how you can actually use an offer and podcast closing to make money is actually using it for a joint venture opportunity. So if we go back to the example of selling a $20 product, like we said, we don't want to do 20 interviews to try and sell this $20 product directly to the person we're interviewing, because from a numbers perspective, it just doesn't make sense. However, if you have a lower ticket product, let's say, for example, I want to sell my Content Launch Secrets program. It's $27. It teaches you how to map out a year's worth of content. Let's say I wanted to sell more of that program. So how could I do it using podcast closing? Well, one of the first things that I could do is I could say, well, if I can sell this product to somebody else's audience, then that would make sense from a numbers perspective. So if we use the same example again of Catherine Jones, if I interview Catherine Jones, we build a relationship on that podcast, and then I make her an offer to say, hey, Catherine, you have design hackers. They probably want to create a lot of content. We should sell them my $27 Content Launch Secrets program. If she says yes, then we're going to be selling my $27 product to her community. So if she has 1,000, 2,000, 5,000 people that are my dream customers that I can sell to, then that deal makes sense. And this is actually what just happened inside of the Podcasting 101 group today. Me and Catherine Jones are doing a joint venture together, and that actually came from a podcast interview. Now, these kind of approaches are a bit of a slower burn, because with anything that involves a joint venture, you have to build up a relationship, and it can sometimes take a little bit longer than just a podcast interview and directly into a sale. I originally did the very first interview with Catherine Jones around about 6 months ago. Since we've done that interview, we've been able to grow our relationship together better. And then a couple of months ago, I made her an offer to come and do a joint venture to my group, and I'm also doing a joint venture into her group. Now, although that is a little bit of a longer time scale, it also is more than likely going to be much more profitable than me just selling Catherine a $5,000 product. Altogether, with the two joint ventures that we're doing, there's a very good chance that both of us will clear between $40,000 and $50,000. So it is a slower burn, but the reward is much bigger on the other end. And especially as you begin to grow in status and as you get bigger and bigger people that you can build these relationships with, then the reward gets bigger as well. For example, Catherine may have 2,000 people in her audience, but the next person I do a joint venture with might have 40,000 or 100,000 people. So therefore, the results are exponential because of that. So the very first thing you want to understand is, which of these types of offers are you trying to make when it comes to podcast closing? Are you making an offer that is selling directly to the person that you want to interview? And that typically will only work if you are selling a mid to high tier ticket offer, a $1,000 or higher offer that you are making. Or are you looking to make a one-to-many joint venture style offer in which you are trying to build a relationship and then make them an offer to do a joint venture together? Now, whichever option you decide to go for, there's a very good chance that both of these offers that you put out there, if you make it with enough people, you can start to make a lot more money. So the very first thing you want to understand is, what is my offer? Is it a high ticket product, or is it a lower to mid-level ticket product? And am I trying to get people to buy this by interviewing them, or am I trying to build a joint venture relationship with them? Now, there's a couple of different factors that you also want to consider with this. If you are selling directly to your dream customer, then you are going to have to do that through a sales conversation. So you are going to be selling from a one-to-one basis. Whereas if you are going to be doing a joint venture style product, you'll usually be doing a one-to-many style approach, where maybe you go live in their group, or they go live in your group, or something along the lines of that. So you definitely want to think about which style suits you better when you're considering about what kind of offer to put it out there. Now, my advice to everybody who's starting brand new in this program is to actually focus on option one first, which is to sell a higher ticket product and sell directly to your dream customer. The reason I recommend that is that, one, it's typically easier to get a result with that method. But what's also good is that later on, after you've done that, you can actually circle back round and use the second method by doing a joint venture together. You know, if I sell a product to somebody today and they use that product and they enjoy it and they have an audience, then that opens the door to us doing a joint venture later down the track. So if you're in this position right now and you're thinking, man, Jamie, I just don't know what kind of product I want to do. I don't know whether to do a higher ticket product, or I don't know whether to do a low ticket product, and I don't know which of these choices to use. If you are unsure, then I would recommend that you use the first method, which is to sell a higher ticket product and to interview your dream customer directly. Doing this is going to give you a much bigger result in a much quicker space of time. Now, if you are unsure about what that product could be, Catherine Jones is a great example of a type of product which works very, very well in this market. If you can sell any service business, from designing funnels to doing Facebook advertisement to all other manners of service businesses like that, those are often some of the easiest products to sell at the higher ticket level. So if you were coming into this completely unknown and said to me, Jamie, what would be the best thing that I could do if I have no experience in anything? I would tell you the best thing to do is to podcast close by speaking to your dream customer and selling them a service. And the service that I would sell them would be funnel design. And Catherine is a great example of somewhere you can go to learn that for not a lot of money. I think you can get into a program for $197 on a payment plan, which is absolutely fantastic. So that would be the very first thing, is you have to get clear on what your offer is going to be. And then you have to make a decision on what type of selling you want to do. Now, the reason that's important is just so that you can build your podcast to facilitate that offer. What I mean by that is, if you know that your dream customers are entrepreneurs and the product that you want to sell them is funnel design, then when you are building your show, you want to make sure that your show is attractive to your dream customer who needs that product or service. So if I was to ask you what kind of entrepreneur would be wanting to build a funnel, who would love to come on a show, well, you could look at somebody like people in the ClickFunnels community. They understand about funnels. And if you interviewed those people on your show, you just have to make sure that your show topic is exciting for them so that they want to come on it. Your big goal here is that whoever your dream customer is, you want to be able to attract them to your show so that they actually want to be a guest, right? If you had a show and your dream customer was a doctor, but your show was about, I don't know, how to do online marketing, well, a doctor, unless they have a really big interest in online marketing, is not going to want to come on your podcast, right? Because there's not something that they're interested in. It isn't a topic that they enjoy or love. So it's going to be a little bit more difficult for that kind of mannerism. So that's a very, very important thing to understand. Now, once you get clear on understanding your offer, the second thing that we want to help you guys to understand is, how can you actually understand who your dream customer is? And this is going to be very, very important, because for your podcast, if you are doing podcast closing where you're going to interview the person that you want to sell to, you have to really understand who that person is, and you have to understand them as an avatar. So you should know about where they hang out online. You should know about what they're interested in. You should know about what their normal everyday life looks like. You should understand a little bit about their behavior. And there's a very great copywriter who actually said that instead of actually advertising to customers, you really want to enter the conversation that's already going on in your customer's mind. So if your customer is already thinking about a certain topic, you want to bring that topic up. So you don't have to create conversation. You just have to understand about your dream customer so you can actually enter that conversation that's already going on inside of their mind. So if we've made the decision that, okay, we are going to have a podcast where we're going to sell a high ticket product, and I'm going to interview my dream customer, and I'm going to use the podcast closing strategy we talk about in the lab to make them an offer, you have to understand, who is that person that I want to get on my show. Now, the number one way that I would really get you guys to understand this is to do the full listener avatar exercise in the very first week of the Podcast Profit Lab. I think it's under day 1. We give you a secondary sheet or worksheet to work through, and we give you a bunch of questions to answer to help you really get into the mind of who your dream customer is. Now, some of you might say, well, why is this important? Why do I need to really understand who my dream customer is? Well, if you don't understand who the perfect customer is to buy your product, then one of the challenges that you have is, how do you spot them in the wild? As in, how do you know which customer to reach out to say, come onto my show? And the other thing that can be a little bit of a challenge with this as well is that if you don't understand exactly who your dream customer is, then how do you make sure that every person that you're interviewing is that dream customer? You first have to be able to truly understand who that person is. So every single one of you guys who's here with me on this call, I understand that you're my dream customer. There's a lot of traits that you've shown that means that you're the perfect customer to come through our program and to have success. So I think that's very, very important. So before you actually design and create your show, it's a really good idea to ask yourself, what am I selling? How much am I selling it for? How am I going to sell it? And then who is the dream customer that I want to sell that product to? So if first of all, we're saying, okay, what am I going to sell? Well, I'm going to sell funnel designs as a service. I'm going to sell building a podcast as a service. I'm going to sell doing Facebook ads, whatever your thing is. So you first decide what it is that you're going to sell. Then you have to decide, okay, well, how much am I going to sell this for? I'm going to sell it for $1,000, $10,000, $5,000, whatever the price may be. And then from there, you can figure out the other pieces of the puzzle so you can get crystal clear on what your offer is and who you're going to be selling it to. So make sure, if you've got a pen and paper to hand right now, you're writing down these questions. And if you haven't got the answer for it right now, make sure you explore and try and understand and figure out, who is that dream customer? what is the product I'm selling? How much am I going to be selling it for? And what way am I going to be selling it? Are you going to be reaching out and doing a one-to-one interview and then making them an offer afterwards? Or are you going to do more of a joint venture approach and make them an offer to sell your product to their audience instead? So hopefully by now you've got beginnings of an idea of what your product offer would be, and understanding a little bit about why it's important to understand who your dream customer is. Now, once you're able to outline your avatar of your customer, so once you start to begin to understand who they are, you could give an example and say, my dream customer is Jerry. Jerry really likes to hang out in these online places. He's got 2 small children. He has a wife. What he does in his spare time is, research and builds his business. He's resilient. He's tenacious. He has a desire to truly understand things on a deeper level. He's a giving, heartwarming person who puts other people first. You want to be able to really get a very, very clear vision in your mind of who your dream customer is. Now, the next step, and this is now you've got your offer outlined, how much it's going to be, who you're going to sell it to. You've got this idea of who your dream customer is. The next thing you have to think about is, okay, if now I know that my dream customer is an entrepreneur, it's this kind of person, they're doing this, or whoever that person is, the next thing you want to try and understand is, well, if I am going to be interviewing this person for my show, what would my show be about? And this is where, when we go through the exercise in week 1, understanding your podcast identity pillars, it makes this a little bit easier. Because the very first thing we do is we help you understand, who is your dream customer? Where are you trying to take them? What is the show discussion and the topic going to be about? And why is this show different to other shows that are out there? So if you understand that my dream customer is this type of person, and for me to make a sale, I have to interview you and speak directly to you, you can say, well, what kind of show would that dream customer want to come on? So let me give you an example to help illustrate this. So let's say that I am a marketing company that sells marketing services to chiropractors. So I want to sell to chiropractors. I sell a $2,000 service. I'm going to go and interview a chiropractor. And then after I've built up a relationship, I'm going to make them an offer for my product or service. If that is the kind of customer that you want to reach out to, then you have to ask yourself the question, if I'm going to create a podcast, what kind of podcast would I create that a chiropractor would want to come on to as a guest? So instead of it being a show around Facebook ads and marketing, which might be your initial idea, instead you would say, well, what show would a chiropractor want to come on to? And you might make your show instead about something that they would be interested in. So maybe it's about how chiropractors are growing their business. Maybe it's about how chiropractors are growing online. So maybe it's the Chiropractic Online Growth Podcast or something along the lines of that. You want it to be a place where these chiropractors actually want to come and share and talk about the things that they're doing. And it's actually a very good idea if the topic of your show can follow the same lines of what your service offers. So for example, if I am selling Facebook ads, then the conversation topic should be around customer and client acquisition or traffic, because I might talk about other options with my person that I'm interviewing. We might talk about Facebook groups, about organic and all of these other areas. But it's very easy for me to pull the conversation back to Facebook ads because the topic of my show is around that area. It follows the same narrative as what my product actually is in. So wherever your product lives, whatever niche it's in, try and jump out backwards to the sub niche. And that's always a really good topic to talk about with your podcast guests, because it keeps them in the general conversation about your product without talking exactly about it. So for example, if you helped, people's dogs stop barking, then a topic that would be good to talk about would be dog behavior, because you're not going to necessarily talk specifically about your thing, but it's a broad enough topic that you can bring it up to the conversational piece of what you do specifically inside of your business. So hopefully now we've got the framework laid out. We know that we have to get clear on our offer, and we have to understand the price and the value and how we're going to make it. And then the second thing is we're now starting to get a picture of who our dream customer is. So if our dream customer is an entrepreneur, we want to say, okay, what kind of show would an entrepreneur be interested to come into? And this is the very first thing that we want to understand. Now, once you've got that baseline understanding of who your dream customer is, how you're going to sell to them, and what kind of show they want to come on to, this is where we can actually get started with beginning to make money before our show is even launched. But you first have to understand, who do I want to sell to? What am I going to sell them? And what kind of show would they be interested to come on to? And that gives you the baseline framework of being able to go out and start interviewing people. Now, throughout the program inside of the Podcast Profit Lab, you're going to now go and build out your podcast. You're going to build out the assets, you're going to build the show, you're going to create a launch strategy. But how do you actually start making money straight away before you have the podcast launched and up and running? Well, the very first thing you can do is you can actually go out and start to make a list of your dream customers. Now, you can do this one of two ways. You can go and create a general avatar, and you can go and try and find people who fit in that avatar, or you can specifically target people who you think would be a good fit for your product and service. So to go back to the example of Catherine Jones, if she is my perfect customer because she has an audience of entrepreneurs, I don't need to go from an avatar. I know exactly the people that I want to go and interview to go and sell my product or service to. So I can just reach out directly to them. However, if I wanted to go and sell podcast services to somebody, and I said, okay, it needs to be somebody who has an audience but doesn't yet have a podcast, that's more of an avatar. So it's a little bit of a broader angle, and I'm going to be doing research to find out who those people are. Now, if you have that list, and I would recommend that you guys start with a list of between 10 and 20 people, and literally write down on that list who these people are that you want to go and reach out to. So whether you need to go from an avatar, which is a broad idea of who your dream customer could be, and go and find people that fit that avatar, or whether you can just go individually and reach out to the people that you know are a good fit, you want to create that list of 20 people. These are 20 people that you would love to interview on your show who would also be a good fit to buy your product or service. Or if you're doing a joint venture, somebody that has that audience, just like the Catherine Jones example that I gave you. So once you've got that list of 20 people, it's a little bit like making a sales call at this point. You would just decide and make the decision. So I'm going to reach out and I'm going to interview these people, even though my podcast is not yet launched. Now, some people would say, well, Jamie, how can I do that? I don't know what my podcast is going to be about. I don't know what conversations we're going to have. I don't know that kind of process. Well, you're going to learn that process throughout the Podcast Profit Lab, which is totally okay. But for now, we're thinking about how can you get kickstarted? How can you actually start to make money straight away? So all you need to do is have your list of 20 people that you can reach out to that you want to interview and actually sell your product and service to. Now, if they ask you why you're reaching out, you want to send them a message that goes something along the lines of this. Hey there, Craig. I wanted to reach out and just say I'm a huge fan of everything that you put out online. I absolutely love the fact that you're an expert in building local businesses. I think that's incredible. I'm actually launching a brand new podcast now. I'd love to interview you. I would love for you to share your expertise on how you can build local businesses in a short space of time. Let me know if you wanted to come on. I think it would be really fantastic. Don't worry if not, if you're too busy. I just thought it would be a good opportunity to reach out. So you can just send a short voice memo or a video. And I would really recommend that you do that rather than a written example, because you're going to get usually a much higher response rate if it's an audio message or if it's a video, because it's much more personable. And those 20 people on the list, you can send them all a message of something along the lines of that. And generally speaking, you will usually get about 60 to 80% of those people who will respond and say yes. Now, there's a little caveat that I need to throw in here. If you are reaching out to Tony Robbins, Oprah, and Russell Brunson, they probably are not going to say yes to coming onto your brand new podcast. So you want to make sure that you're making, when you're picking these people who are these 20 people on the list, you don't want to be going for these people who have this big list, who are big sort of super popular people. You actually want to be just going for people who are, one, could be a good customer for you, two, who would, benefit from your product or service, and then three is somebody that isn't necessarily super massive. Now, the exception to this rule would be, let's say your dream customers are people with big audiences. Obviously, you may have to speak to people like that. But as a general rule of thumb, most of us, when we're selling to our customers, they don't need to be super successful, super amazing people. They're just usually everyday types of people that would be a good fit for our product or service. And the great thing about this is that a lot of those types of customers haven't always been on podcast interviews before. So they're going to get this immediate sort of bump of self-worth and satisfaction because you're giving them an increase in status by interviewing them on the podcast. Now, what you're doing is you're basically creating a bunch of opportunities for yourself to make these people offers. So if you reach out to 20 people, and these are people that you've handpicked based on an avatar or based on people who would be what you think is a good fit for your product or service, and you send them a personal message within a very short space of time, and guys, I've done this before, you could literally come off this call and do this right away. You could write out a list of 20 people, you can go and send them a voice memo, and you can have that done in less than 45 minutes. Once you've done that, if you get, let's just say you get a lower than average response rate, and let's say you get 10 of those who come back and say, yes, I would love to get on an interview. Those are 10 opportunities and 10 interviews that you can build a relationship, you can understand about their needs, and then at the end of the interview, you can make them an offer. Now, if you want to understand a little bit more about podcast closing and how it works, I would really encourage you to go through the separate module that we have inside of the Podcast Profit Lab, which is called it's the whole podcast closing training that we have. I think it's called Podcast Sales Secrets. So you can go into the membership area and you guys can actually access that. The Podcast Sales Secrets will take you step by step through the process of what you say and how you say it to go from the point of doing the interview to ending the interview to transitioning to making an offer. So if you're not sure on how to do that, then definitely go through that masterclass. You can get through it in a really short space of time. Each video is about 6 or 8 minutes long, and there's only about 15 or so videos in there. And that gives you a complete walkthrough of how to actually do the process of podcast closing. So, and I'll give you a very basic example of how it works right now. So first of all, you would invite somebody who is your dream customer to come on your podcast as a guest. Then you get them on the show and you interview them. You find out about who they are. You find out about their business. You find out about, you build that general rapport and relationship with them. And then there's a couple of 3 key things you want to find out. You want to find out where they're starting from in their business today. And this is if you are helping somebody with a business, of course. You want to find out where they want to go to. So you want to think about where their goals are. And then you want to find out what is standing in their way. What roadblocks have they got? What barriers? What things are slowing them down? By understanding where they are, where they want to get to, and what's in their way, you're going to be able to then make them an offer that helps them to get closer to that goal that they're seeking without hitting that stumbling block that's slowing them down. And that's going to give you those 3 key things are going to help you to understand how you can actually make them an offer, which they'll say yes to. And if you go through the podcast closing framework, we actually have a sales script in there that you guys can use so you can understand once you get them after the interview, listening to your pitch or your offer, how you can get them to saying yes. But honestly, the biggest thing is just to get them to open up to the possibility. Now, most people think this is a really rehearsed and a very strategic thing, and you have to be a really good salesperson. But honestly, the people that have the best success with our program are the people that come at it from a very natural angle. If you interview 10 people who are your dream customer, who have a need for what you are offering, and you're able to build a relationship with them, then you simply offer them what you have. If it makes sense to them, then a lot of them will buy. And there isn't any persuasion or sales ability or anything like that that's actually necessary. The key is to actually do the right targeting on the front end to make sure that you understand exactly who your dream customer is and to make sure that you are getting those people onto the podcast in the first place. If you can do that, then you're in a much stronger place to actually go out and start making offers. So to give you guys, the broad overview of how this works, in a very, very short space of time, you can actually be going out there and making offers to your dream customer. So what do you need to be able to do that? The first thing you need to know is, what are you actually offering? What are you selling? And if you haven't got something to sell right now, the easiest way to go and fix that is to go buy Catherine Jones's program and learn to become a funnel builder, because that will give you an immediate skill, an asset, which you can learn in the next 2 weeks that you can then go and sell to somebody via a podcast. Once you've got clear on what you're offering, then the next thing you need to know is actually understand who you're going to be selling that product to. You need to understand that dream customer and understand the avatar to make sure that everybody that you invite onto your podcast fits that avatar. It would be no good if I brought somebody onto my podcast who, and if I was going to be selling how to teach somebody, and let me give you a different example. If I was going to be teaching people and selling people on how to build a Facebook group, and my product was, I will help you to launch your first Facebook group, and that's what I was selling. If the people who I interviewed on my podcast already had a Facebook group, then they're not really a good fit for my product, right? Because I'm trying to sell them how to launch a group, but they already have one. So the people that I want to bring on my show are the people that don't yet have a group, but maybe are looking to have one or want one or have an audience already, right? So you want to make sure that you're filling your podcast with your dream customers. And then the next step is, if you get this right and you actually invite people who are a good fit for your product, and then you can find out about who they are and build a relationship and find out about what they actually want to achieve and what some of their roadblocks are that are in the way. When you then tell them about your product that helps them to solve that problem, there isn't a whole lot of persuasion that needs to happen. As long as you have an offer that is good value, that's compelling, that maybe has some social proof, as long as your offer is good and you've got the right person that's in that situation, you are going to get a lot of people to say yes. And the goal here is that you don't need to be a good salesperson. You just need to have a consistent system to make offers to people. If you did this and every single month you wrote out a list of 20 people, and then every month you interviewed 10 to 15 to 20 entrepreneurs or 10 to 20 people who are your perfect dream customer, and then after you did an interview with every single one of them, you made every single one of them an offer and you said, hey, so I have this product or service. I would love to, I think you would be a really good fit. Is it okay if I tell you a little bit about it, see what you think? Then you will have made 10 to 20 offers for a high ticket product. And the reality is, on average, even if you suck, between 2 to 5 of those people are going to say yes. And this is the basis of what we talk about with podcast closing. Now, as your business grows, as you grow, and as things change, we can go into a more advanced version of podcast closing, which is what we currently do in our business, which is interviewing people who have an audience to then get them to make an offer. And that's the joint venture thing I was talking about at the very beginning of this training. But for now, for a lot of you, just when it comes to getting started, as long as you can get clear on what you're offering, you can understand who needs that product, your dream customer, and then you understand enough about who they are so that you can invite them onto your show. All you then need to do is to make them an offer that makes sense for the problem that they have. Remember, people don't buy products, they buy solutions. And solutions come from problems and needs that people have. Very recently, I was kicked out of Facebook. A lot of you guys know this. Facebook kicked me off. I went into Facebook jail, and I had a need to communicate with my customers, and I currently wasn't doing that via email. So I had a problem. I could no longer get on Facebook, and I needed to find a solution. So the solution was I needed to get good at writing emails. So I had this problem. I then realized what solution I needed, and then I went and bought a $3,000 program to get better at writing email. And that was the way that the solution came to me. Now, was it the person that was offering that program, was it that he was trying to convince me that I needed it? Was he trying to sell me? No. All that happened was that I had a problem that had been created that made me realize I had a need for that solution. So all that guy needed to do was just talk to me at the right time, and I would buy his product. And that's exactly what happened. And that's exactly what I'm teaching you guys to do in this situation. All you need to do is understand what product you're selling, who would be a good fit for that product, and then just actually talk to those people and then offer them your product. Another really great example of this was one of our students, Lori Lynn. A couple of months ago, she was doing her podcast, and Dan Henry was doing a book tour. So Lori is actually a book editor. So she reached out to Dan Henry, who has done over $10 million, really successful entrepreneur. And she said, hey, Dan, I heard that you're launching a brand new book. I would love to interview you so you can talk about your book on my podcast. He said, yes, great. That sounds fantastic. when she came onto the podcast with him, she said, oh, so you're launching a book? He's like, yeah, we're going through that process. And she's like, she's like, have you finished creating the book yet? And he's like, well, no, we're actually in the process of trying to find a book editor. And she said, well, actually, Dan, I don't know if you know, but I'm actually a book editor. And he said, oh, are you any good? And she said, yeah, I'm really good. And then at the end of the interview, she then talked to him about her offer. Now, was she the most qualified book editor in the world? No. Was she the best salesperson in the world? No. What was it that made Dan Henry, who has a lot of money and could hire anybody to be a book editor, hire Laurie? Well, all it was is that he had a need and she spoke to him and she could fulfill that need. And he trusted her enough from the podcast interview that he then went and hired her. And then she then got his business. And since then, she's got over $30,000 worth of referral business just from working with that one particular person. So you can see, you don't need to be a good salesperson. You just need to be able to be very strategic with the way that you create your podcast. And one thing that's really great about this is some people say to me, but Jamie, like, what if I want my audience to be my dream customer, not the person I interview? Well, let me ask you this question. If your perfect customer is a chiropractor and you interview other chiropractors to talk about chiropractic stuff, who do you think your audience will be? More chiropractors, because they want to listen to what those people are talking about. If your dream customer is a marketer who has a big audience and you interview marketers with big audiences, do you think that other marketers with audiences would then come to listen to what they would be saying? Yeah, exactly. So whoever your dream customer is, if you can go and interview that dream customer, more people just like them will then listen to the content of the podcast, and your podcast listeners will be filled with people who are your dream customer, simply because the subject matter experts that you're interviewing are just like them, right? Entrepreneurs attract other entrepreneurs, athletes attract athletes, book editors attract book editors, authors attract authors. We are interested in our own crafts and the things that we're interested in. So we naturally attract people who are just like us, and that's just human nature. So if you can go out and actually interview people who are your perfect dream customer, then more of those people will follow on in the future and come and listen to the show. So all in all, what I wanted you to take away from this podcast closing masterclass is, one, to actually get started making money using podcast closing, all you need to do is you need to be in a position where you are interviewing your dream customer. It doesn't matter if the podcast isn't launched yet, because we're not publishing the episode and that's where we make the money. We're making money by connecting with people over a podcast, building a relationship, and then making them an offer. And that's exactly what we're going to be helping people to do. So to recap, what you want to take away from this training is, if you're in this program and you're raring to get going, the first thing you want to do is get clear on what are you actually offering. What product are you selling? How much are you selling it for? And what is the way that you're going to sell it? Are you going to sell one-to-one, or are you going to do a JV style approach and sell one-to-many? The next thing you need to do is really understand the avatar of your dream customer. Understand who is the person that I want to sell this product to. And that's the person you should be interviewing on your show. Remember, it's no good you interviewing people that aren't your dream customer. It has to be the dream customer. So the very first thing you need to do is understand who that person is. Then what you want to do is make a list of 20 people who would be the perfect people for you to sell your product or service to. You can either know them by name and maybe you've already got an idea of who these people could be, or you might need to go and do a little bit of research with your avatar at the side to find out which are the people that make sense in this particular situation. Now, once you have done that, and you are ready with that, then you can move into the process of actually doing the podcast closing. And the steps for that are really, really simple. Of those 20 people that you've got on the list, you are going to reach out to them and you're going to send them an audio or a video message, basically praising them on what they do and what's great. Usually some kind of personal remark on something you've seen of their content really works great. So if I wanted Craig to come on my show, I would say, Craig, I just listened to your most recent podcast episode, and I absolutely love the fact that you were talking about how to overcome the coronavirus. I thought it was fantastic. So I would give a personal remark about maybe a piece of content that I've seen of his. And that means that he's like, oh, like he's actually watching my content. Like he understands what I've got going on. And that makes it much more effective for that person to say yes. So you want to reach out and send those 20 people a message. And on average, 60 to 80% of them will say yes to doing an interview. Then when you do an interview, you want to follow the podcast closing framework. You guys can go and check out podcast sales secrets in the membership site if you want to have a full breakdown of that. But in a nutshell, what you're doing is you're interviewing them to build a relationship. You're finding out where they're starting from, where they're going to, and what roadblocks are in the way. And then at the end of the interview, you make them an offer to overcome that problem that they're experiencing. And that offer can be as simple as, hey, so I noticed that you don't have a podcast. I actually had a really great idea with how I can help you. Is it okay if we just take a couple of minutes and I can tell you a little bit about how it works? And it can be as simple as that, as a segue into you then saying, okay, let me tell you a little bit about how it works and let me know what you think. And that's all you need to do, because by interviewing the right people, you don't have to be a good salesperson. You are just giving an offer to people at the right time, solving a problem that they were already looking to solve, and you're being the person that's going to facilitate that and help them to actually do it. So that's the podcast closing frameworks. That's the 3 different pillars. You need to, first of all, get clear on your offer and understand what you're selling. Then you need to understand the dream customer. And then finally, you need to reach out to those people via a message or a video to actually get them onto the interview to do podcast closing. None of any of this which requires you to actually have a launched podcast. It really just needs to be that you are planning to launch a podcast and it's like, hey, I would love to interview on my podcast that I'm coming up to launch. And that is the strategy behind it. I actually have a good friend who's come through this program, and his podcast has not yet launched, but he's done over 50 interviews. And from those interviews, he's actually closed quite a lot of deals because of it. A guy called Matt, who's inside of the program, Matt Decino. And he said it's great because it's just an excuse to go and get in touch with these people who are a good fit for his product or service. And then after the interview, it's this really great segue into talking about how they can help each other actually grow in business. And by the way, guys, my number one tip for you, if you're trying to figure out how can I make sure that I am creating an offer that sells, if you have a product that is genuinely going to enhance somebody's life and help them, then that's all you need. Because if they have a problem and your product helps them to overcome that problem and it becomes a solution, that's something that they will buy. So guys, I'm going to open up the floor to any questions, and we're going to go through and do a little Q&A one by one. And yeah, so if you guys want to unmute yourself, if anybody has any questions, I would love to go through these questions and just help you to understand. So overall, what we were talking about is I want you guys to understand that the process for actually starting to make offers is very simple. You pretty much need to know what you're offering. You need to know who you would sell it to. And then you just need to make a list of people that would be a good fit and go and interview them and make them offers. It really is not too complicated. But guys, feel free to unleash, and I'd love to answer any of the questions that you have.
Okay. So, I kind of know what I'm offering. I don't have like written courses, but I do have courses that I'm qualified to teach. But I just don't know how to offer it and how to reach that person.
So first of all, what is the product that you've got, Nancy?
Okay. So, I am certified to teach, any of John Maxwell's, courses. I'm certified.
Okay, so we'll just keep it super simple. So it's a John Maxwell course, right?
Yeah.
And how much is that course?
I don't have a price on it.
Okay.
No.
As in, you don't know what you would charge for it, or
right.
that you can't get a price for it?
No, I don't know. I don't know what to charge for it.
Okay. What do other people charge for it?
I haven't investigated. I haven't gone that far.
Okay. That would be my first point of call. If you're selling a course that's by somebody else, mm-hmm. The first thing you want to understand is, well, what price do people sell and buy that course for? If it's a $100,000 course that companies buy it at, and you sell it at $100, well, people probably aren't going to buy that because they don't think it's legit or real, right? It's a bit like if I sell an iPhone to you for $100, you're like, what's wrong with the iPhone, right? You're never going to buy it. So It's really, really important to look at what products are sold for in your marketplace, to understand what the average is, what the high tier is, what the highest price is. And the way that I always like to do it is if there's a middle tier and a higher tier, I always like to make sure that I go somewhere in the middle between those two, but I make sure that the value of my offer is stacked really, really highly. So for example, Nancy, let's just give you an example and say, let's say it's the John Maxwell course. How could you increase the value? Well, maybe you give them a checklist of everything they need to do in the course. Maybe you give them daily coaching with it. Maybe you're going to give them an email prompt every day on the thing that they need to do. So there's parts that you can add on to that core offer to make it higher value. So that's the first thing is, like we said, step one, understand what it is that you're offering and understand how much that product is going to be.
Okay. If no one else has, I can keep going. So what if if I were to offer a coaching?
Okay. So, so first of all, if you were to offer coaching, would it be one-to-one coaching or group coaching?
One-to-one.
Okay. So one-to-one coaching, and how much do you want to charge for it?
I don't know.
Okay. Well, the good thing about pricing is that you're completely in control. You can charge however much you want to get paid. My advice would be, if you're selling coaching services, make sure that the cost of it is based off the problem that you solve with the coaching. So, for example, if I'm going to coach you on how to butter your toast in the morning and make sure you get to the edges, it's not a very big problem to solve. So nobody would in their right mind pay $10,000 for that coaching, right?
Okay.
But if I was going to coach you how to run a really successful team in just 2 hours a day, then the problem that we're solving is exponentially more valuable, and therefore you can charge more money for it. So what problem are you solving with the coaching, Nancy?
Okay, so I'm focusing on leadership development, on developing coaches. My struggle prior to becoming a leadership development coach, my struggle prior to that was I was a leader myself, and I was a bad leader because nobody wanted to work with me because I was just so horrible at communication. I would hurt people's feelings, and I was just I was full of myself. And so when I understood that, hey, I was a problem, and I started looking for ways to better my leadership, then I figured, hey, how many people are out there who are bad leaders and they need some direction? So I want to help leaders who are struggling with their leadership. They know that they're struggling, and they know that they're the problem, and they want to fix it.
Okay, great. So that makes it really easy, because the first thing there is we know exactly who the dream customer is. Now, the more challenging part about something like your offer, Nancy, is that it's a little bit like saying to somebody, and we'll give the example here, is like saying, if you're a bad parent and you're a bad mother and you recognize that and you want to get better, would that woman want to come on a podcast to talk about how bad she is as a mother?
No.
No. Why is that? So the reason why is that because what we've got is actually what we would call an improvement offer. It's to actually sell this product, somebody has to first admit that they aren't very good. And the problem is, as human beings, we're perfect, right? There's nothing wrong with us. We would never do anything wrong. So what we have to make sure we do whenever we're creating an offer is we want to make sure that we're making it really easy for our customer, and we're actually giving them a new opportunity. So, for example, if we use the mother example there, right? Like if the mom is feeling exhausted and stressed and she just locked her kids in the cupboard because she can't deal with them during the coronavirus. Well, if we said to her, hey, are you being a really terrible mom right now and locking your kids away? Well, it's actually because you suck at parenting. Let me help you become a better parent. It's not a very good angle, right? And nobody's going to come on a podcast for that. But if instead you say, hey, so just so you know, the way that you're being taught to teach your kids is this way, and you're probably feeling this, that, the other. Did you know there's actually a new and a different way that you could do this that's going to give you this, 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 and this? Well, by actually telling people there's a new way, it takes a lot of pressure off them, because it's like, it wasn't me, it was just the method that I was using. So one thing that's going to be really, really important, Nancy, is that you have to figure out, how can I create a show that gets my dream customer, this person who is struggling with leadership, it gets them to want to come on the show, and more importantly, gets them to want to talk about the things that they want to talk about. Because if your show was, I interview terrible business leaders that suck in leadership and can't figure out their toe from their ankle, well, like, no one's going to want to come on that show, right? So what you might have to figure out about your avatar is not to figure out about the pain point of being a bad leader, but actually to figure out and say, well, you know what? all of my leaders that are struggling with this are in businesses that are between $100,000 and $300,000. Those businesses typically have a couple of staff members and are trying to grow. So what if I interviewed growing startup founders who have a team of 4 or more people to talk about what they're doing to grow their business? Now that topic will attract your dream customers, and it's something that they might want to talk about. So the topic of your show doesn't actually have to tie into the thing that you do. Because if you have a leadership podcast and you are inviting somebody onto that leadership podcast and they are not a good leader, then that doesn't make sense from a congruency angle, right? But if you invited somebody who was a good leader onto the show, then they wouldn't buy your product or service, right? Because they're already good at leading. They don't need that help. So what you have to figure out is, how do I position my show so that my dream customer wants to come on and wants to talk to me, and I make sure I'm attracting the right person? And you'll notice that my own podcast, the Entrepreneur Junkie Movement, nowhere does it say this is a podcast show. This is about making a podcast. Why? Because that would actually attract the wrong type of person. So my show is about, I interview entrepreneurs who are creating mass movements, and we talk about some of the struggles and vulnerability they've had along the way. So that gets somebody on my show who has or wants to create a mass movement. And what I do is I make sure I filter, and I won't bring somebody on the show if they already have a podcast, if I'm trying to sell that as a service. Does that make sense? So it's an environment where we're getting my dream customers coming onto my show. We're talking about a topic that isn't what I offer, but is along the same lines, so that the conversation, the narrative follows the same format. And then when you then start to talk about, your experiences and your customers' results, at the end of it, they say, hey, so I know I came onto this show to actually talk about growing a business, but what you were talking about with being able to help a team get out of stress and people were feeling less anxious, and you told me that story of that customer that you'd helped, that sounds amazing. Can you tell me a little bit about that? And by sharing your own version of that at the end of the interview, before you've even offered somebody something, they can sometimes reach out to you and say, hey, I really want to learn more about that thing that you're talking about. So that's why you want to position it that way. Does that help you to think about how to position the show?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Awesome. All right, great. Well, we went a little bit deeper there. Has anybody got any other questions that they would like to ask, or anything else you want to go through?
I have a question.
Hey, Cherie.
Hey. So I had my offer up for a dental hygienist to help them find a job. Obviously, I'm not going to be helping them find a job right now because nobody's working. So I'm looking at tweaking my funnel to instead have them realize all the opportunities that are for dental hygienists outside of working in an office. So okay. Do I clone the funnel and then just change everything in it?
Probably my biggest question is, why is the funnel so important?
Well, because that's the offer, is giving them a class, or do I just do a webinar?
So what's the offer? What's the first piece? What's the thing that you're selling?
So it is, for right now, it is selling them opportunities of finding jobs outside that they maybe didn't know about. Because until I started doing the podcast and talking to all of these people, hygienists, dentists, all that, I didn't even know that these options were available. So that would have been good if I had known when I was divorced. So the offer is teaching them all of these options that are available, and then giving the resources to these people that are holding the classes. And then I JV with those people. Like I interviewed one girl.
So is it like a course?
It'll be a course. Yes.
Okay. So and what's the price point going to be?
Well, at first it was $297 is what I was offering them the course for, because it's a one-day pay.
Yeah. So let's say it's that then. Let's say it's $297. So the question that you had was, what was your question about that?
Do I clone the funnel that I have right now? Because it's the funnel I have right now is a course, and I send them to, it's got modules of things to learn about how to find a job. So it's basically, the one I have right now is mindset, questions to ask yourself, questions to ask the dentist, and then how to actually go interview, how to find the jobs. So now it's going to tweak to still mindset and questions to ask yourself, but now it will be, what is your specialty? What do you like? You know, like one girl does dirty teeth, one girl does air, one girl does cancer. So to get them in the mindset that even though you're a dental hygienist and you see patients based on your experiences or beliefs, you have a whole nother thing out there. Like you could start working in nursing homes. You could start going to schools. You could start holding live events. Like I've been holding live events for the last 3 months until it got shut down. So they could do all the things that I'm doing.
Yeah, so I think it's very difficult for me to tell you what the best thing is to do, because it's kind of like there's lots of moving pieces there, and I don't know what your funnel looks like, and I don't know about those kind of pieces. But what I can tell you is that what your funnel should be is your funnel should be a way to convince them about that they need the product or offer. So, and really, whether we're doing podcast closing or we're selling them through a funnel, it's really fundamentally the same thing. We first of all need to get the right customer, the person that is your dream customer, to a situation where you can build a rapport. You either build a rapport through a sales page, through video and a story, or you do it one-to-one on a podcast interview. Then when you transition to making them an offer, you just have to make them understand, is this offer going to help them with the situation that they have? So what you want the whole funnel to be, Cherie, just the same as a podcast interview, is you want that funnel to be helping them to understand what problem that you're solving and how it solves that problem. Okay. So it's the same with everything, right? If I was going to sell the podcast Profit Lab to somebody that had just lost their job, I wouldn't be talking about, hey, how you can make lots of money and become an entrepreneur. I would say, hey, have you just lost your job? Is this the pain you're feeling? Are you seeking this solution? Let me tell you a story about how this thing I'm going to tell you about is going to be the answer to your problems and the thing that you're looking for. And just the same as with the podcast interview, the biggest thing that we want to do is we want to make sure that we're speaking to people who have a need for the product that we sell. Because if they already have a need for the product, and they're the right fit for it, as long as you have a good, compelling offer that makes sense that people want to buy, you don't have to do much convincing. You usually just have to build a relationship and present them an offer. And, you know, it's very much the same in this kind of situation. So there's a couple more layers of complexity to it, Shri, because it's a lower ticket offer. You have to kind of sell it through a medium. You wouldn't want to necessarily be selling this one-to-one, like we're talking about with podcast closing, just because the value of it isn't high enough for it to make sense for your time. So I think the biggest thing you want to do is, the first thing is you want to make sure, well, what problem am I solving and how am I going to solve that problem?
Okay, you answered my question. I need to just do a webinar funnel and then I can sell it to the people that I'm interviewing because they're dental hygienists. So you did answer the question. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay, I'm glad because I wanted to make sure that we felt good on that. All right, okay, great. So running out of time. Anybody else have any other questions? Anything else that they want to ask? And if not,
I do.
That's totally okay. Oh, hey Virginia, how are you doing?
Hi, good. Should I be worried about the market being oversaturated with people offering funnels?
Absolutely not.
For the podcast side?
No, because the thing with this, and this is a big mistake that a lot of people make. A lot of people think that an oversaturated market is a bad thing. Actually, an oversaturated market is actually a good thing, because what that means is there's lots of sellers, but that also means there's lots of buyers in that marketplace. So one of the piece of advice I always have to anybody in this situation is, if you've not read .com Secrets and Expert Secrets, definitely read those books because it helps you understand market positioning and things like that. But you actually want to sell to customers who are in that oversaturated market. So I sell into the ClickFunnels market. So I go and I sell people from ClickFunnels into my product or service. So the way that you stand out from the competition here, Virginia, is that you don't want to be a commodity. So you don't want to offer what everybody else is offering at progressively cheaper and cheaper and cheaper prices. You want to make sure that what you do is a new opportunity in it, and it's defined within like a sub niche or a market. So for example, one of my other students, Susan Leonardson, she was building funnels. And are you a funnel builder, Virginia? Is that what you do?
I am, yes.
Okay, so if you build every type of funnel for every type of entrepreneur, it's very broad. And it also can become a little bit of a commodity because there's lots of people that do that. But for example, if you were to design membership funnels for course creating entrepreneurs who have customers in the health industry, that's a much more niche down solution. And creating funnels for that type of person is a more niche down market. So long story short, to answer your question, I don't think it's bad to be in an oversaturated market. I think you just have to understand how to make yourself a new opportunity and how to pull those people into your own subnet.
Okay, because otherwise I was like marketing to people in the ClickFunnels group and the 2CCX group. Most of them already have their own funnel built anyway, right?
Yeah, but what's interesting is that doesn't mean that they don't ever need to have another funnel built. So for example, a lot of it is just about need. So, I build my own funnels. I've always built my own funnel, but last month I was overwhelmed and busy and I needed a funnel built and I spent $1,500 getting somebody to build a funnel. Now that isn't, a $20,000 funnel build, but there are people who are at 10 times the level of what I'm at who have that same thing that they run into where, hey, I just need to have a funnel built for $10,000, and it's just about speaking to the right person with the right desire and need. Just like Laurie's example with Dan Henry, as long as you can be speaking to people who have a need for the product you have and you can build that relationship, as long as you have a great offer that solves that problem they have, then you're in business.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
No worries. Anybody have any other questions or we're good to go? Okay, guys, awesome. Well, my challenge for you is to take what we've learned today and not just store it in some place at the back of your brain and say, well, that was nice. Let's slot that into the memory card. What I want you to do is to take what we've talked about today and to create your own battle plan to getting started podcast closing straight away. So look at what we've talked about. Think about what is your offer going to be and how much is your offer going to be. Ask yourself the question, who is my dream customer and what is it that defines them? Give them that avatar. Write down a list of the 20 people that you can reach out to in the next couple of weeks who would be a good fit to be a customer of yours, and then go and invite them onto an interview and then start making them an offer. Now, those first 20 interviews and the first 20 offers you make, they may be uncomfortable. They may not be perfect. You may stumble over your words. You may say the wrong thing, but ultimately those people aren't going to be upset. The worst thing they can say is no. And very, very likely is the fact that if you follow the training that we're breaking down inside of the Podcast Profit Lab, is there's a very good chance that even on the first, second, or third time you do it, that somebody's going to say yes, and you are off to the races making money with your customers. So thanks so much for being here with me today, guys. I hope you got some good stuff out of this training. And yeah, drop down inside of the Podcast Profit Lab group, go jump into the Facebook group and just give me a hashtag takeaway. Let me know what was your biggest takeaway from the training today. And other than that, I will see you guys tomorrow on our live call. I'm super excited. Thanks, guys. See you later.